In a distant galaxy, under the rule of a powerful alien queen, the stars shined bright with the light of countless worlds. The queen, known as Queen Liana, was the leader of a mighty empire, respected and feared by many. Her species, the Zenthor, were known for their strength, wisdom, and advanced technology. Queen Liana had always been in control, commanding her people with grace and iron will. Her people trusted her, and her empire was thriving. But even a ruler, as powerful as Liana, could not escape the politics of the galaxy. For years, there had been talks of alliances between her empire and the human race. The humans, while young in the galactic community, had shown a remarkable resilience and adaptability. Still, many in Liana's court viewed them as weak, nothing more than a minor species that could be easily controlled. Then one day, a human arrived on her planet, a diplomat named Ethan. His mission was simple: to establish a peace agreement between the humans and the Zenthor. Liana had expected him to be just another negotiator, but from the moment he stepped onto her palace, she felt something different. He was not like the other humans she had encountered. Ethan was a young man, tall and lean, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface. His clothes were simple, nothing extravagant, yet his presence commanded attention. He walked, with confidence, as if he had nothing to fear. Liana was intrigued by him, but she did not show it. She was the queen, and she had seen many diplomats come and go. The fate of her empire was not to be decided by one man, no matter how impressive he seemed. As the meeting between Ethan and the queen progressed, Liana was struck by his words. While most human diplomats were careful with their speech, Ethan spoke with a directness that she had never experienced. He did not hide behind flowery words or elaborate negotiations. Instead, he spoke plainly, with honesty, offering solutions. That seemed to make sense. It was refreshing, and for the first time in a long while, Liana found herself listening closely. The talks went on for several days, and during that time, something unexpected happened. Liana began to feel a connection with Ethan. His ideas were unlike anything she had heard before. He did not just talk about peace. He spoke of unity and understanding between their species. It was a new way of thinking, a way that Liana had never considered. Despite the differences between their worlds, Ethan saw potential for cooperation. It was during one of their private conversations that Liana first began to truly see him. She had never been one to trust easily, especially not humans. But Ethan's words stirred something inside her. He spoke of strength, but not in the way her people defined it. He spoke of the strength of character, the strength that came from overcoming hardship. It was a kind of strength she had never seen in any of her kind, and she found herself admiring him. As the days went by, the peace talks reached a crucial point. The final agreement was ready to be signed, but there was a catch. Liana's advisors insisted that she marry Ethan to seal the deal. It was an unusual request, but one that had been done before in galactic diplomacy. Marrying someone from an allied species was a powerful symbol of unity. Liana had never considered marriage as part of the equation, but the pressure from her court was immense. She hesitated, unsure of what to do. Ethan was a human, a species she had always viewed as inferior, but as she thought about it, she realized that marrying him could bring more than just peace. It could strengthen her position, unite their worlds, and set an example for the galaxy. The choice was clear, but still, a part of her hesitated. Ethan, on the other hand, was caught off guard. When he was informed of the Queen's decision, he had no idea how to react. He was a diplomat, not a royal. Marriage to a queen of another species was not something he had ever imagined. But he understood the importance of the moment. He knew that this union would be historic, and while he did not fully understand the Queen's motivations, he agreed to the marriage. The wedding was a grand affair. The palace was decorated with shimmering lights, and the air was filled with the sounds of alien music. Liana wore her royal attire, a gown that shimmered with the colors of the galaxy. Her crown was made of precious stones from across the universe, and her presence alone commanded respect. Ethan, dressed in simple but elegant clothes, stood beside her, a symbol of the strange union between two very different species. As the ceremony began, Liana looked out at the crowd. She could feel their eyes on her, waiting for her to make her vows. She had always been a ruler, strong and independent. Marriage had never been something she had desired, but now it was a tool, a means to an end. But as she looked at Ethan standing beside her, she felt a flicker of something else, something she could not quite explain. Ethan stood tall, his eyes fixed on Liana. Despite the grandeur of the ceremony, he was focused on her, on the weight of the moment. He had never expected his life to take such a turn. He had come to this distant world to negotiate peace, and now he was about to marry its queen. The vows were exchanged, and the crowd erupted in applause. Liana, the powerful queen, was now married to a human, a species she had once considered beneath her. It was a political move, but as the ceremony ended and the two of them walked together side by side, something changed. Liana felt a strange sense of unease. She had made her choice, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this union than she had anticipated. Ethan, the human she had wed, was not just any diplomat. He was different, and she couldn't help but wonder, had she made a mistake? After the wedding, life in the royal palace seemed to continue as normal. The galaxy's leaders, diplomats, and citizens were watching with great interest, curious about the union between the powerful alien queen and the human diplomat. Queen Liana, once the unquestioned ruler of the Zenthor Empire, now found herself in a new position, one she had never imagined. Ethan, her new husband, had already started to feel the pressure of his new life. The human had never imagined he would be married to a queen, let alone one as powerful as Liana. Despite the initial excitement of the wedding and the celebrations, he now faced the daunting task of adjusting to the alien customs and traditions that were so different from his own. Liana had expected Ethan to struggle. She assumed that, as a human, he would be out of his depth, unable to adapt to the alien ways of her people. After all, humans were young, and their culture was still developing, compared to the ancient Zenthor. But what bothered her most was not Ethan's struggles with the customs. It was his apparent indifference to the situation. He didn't seem to care about fitting in with her world. Instead, he was more focused on finding his place, on understanding what he could offer her people. His presence in the palace felt strangely out of place, yet strangely right. Every day, the human spent hours in the royal library, studying the history, culture, and traditions of the Zenthor people. Liana would often watch him from afar, curious about his perseverance. Ethan was not a man who gave up easily. While others expected him to fail, he continued to press on, working hard to learn everything about the empire he had just joined. Despite his lack of experience, his intelligence shone through. His ability to grasp new concepts quickly and find creative solutions to problems made him stand out. However, despite his efforts, Ethan still felt like an outsider. No matter how much he learned, he could never truly blend in. The Zenthor were a proud, ancient species, and their way of life was very different from his own. Even though Liana had been kind to him, there was still an unspoken distance between them. She was the queen, distant, powerful, and full of responsibility. Ethan was a mere human, caught between the politics of the galaxy and his own personal struggle to belong. One evening, as Liana sat in her private chambers, she reflected on the strange situation she now found herself in. Her advisors and allies had congratulated her on the marriage, calling it a strategic move to strengthen her position. Yet deep down, she couldn't help but wonder if the union was really as simple as that. There were moments when she caught herself watching Ethan closely, moments when she was unsure of what she was feeling. There was something about him that made her feel vulnerable, something she had never felt before. She wasn't sure whether she admired him, pitied him, or felt something deeper. It wasn't just Ethan's intelligence or resilience that surprised her, it was his character. Even though he came from a species that was often viewed as weak, by many he carried himself with an inner strength that the Queen could not ignore. He didn't seek attention or approval. Instead, he worked quietly, steadily, never asking for anything in return. It was as though he believed that by earning her respect, he could prove something greater than just a political marriage. One day, a problem arose that would test both Lyanna and Ethan. An important diplomatic mission required the Queen to lead a group of her advisors to a neighboring system. The mission was critical, as tensions between the Zenthor and another alien species were rising. War seemed imminent, and the peace talks that had been set in motion by Ethan's arrival were at risk of collapsing. The situation was dire. The Queen was expected to represent her empire with strength and poise, as always. Her reputation was at stake, and she had to make the right decisions. But for the first time in months, Lyanna felt uncertain. The diplomatic mission was difficult, and she knew the risks involved. She was used to controlling every aspect of her life, but now there were forces at play that even she couldn't control. As the preparations for the mission began, Lyanna found herself turning to Ethan for support. It was strange for her to admit, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he might be able to offer a perspective that no one else could. He had a unique way of looking at things, one that was free from the weight of her species' centuries of tradition. "Ethan," she said one evening as they stood in the royal gardens, "do you ever feel like the weight of the galaxy is too much to carry?" Ethan, standing next to her, looked out at the stars. He had never seen a sky like this before, so vast and full of endless possibilities. It was overwhelming, but in a strange way it gave him a sense of peace. "I think everyone feels that way," he replied softly. "But sometimes the weight doesn't seem so heavy when you share it with someone." Lyanna turned to face him. His words, simple as they were, made something stir inside her. He wasn't just a diplomat anymore. He was someone who had begun to understand her, perhaps better than anyone else. "I didn't expect you to understand," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "I thought you would be like the others, just a tool to use, a way to make my empire stronger. But you've made me question everything I thought I knew." Ethan looked at her with sincerity. "I didn't come here to be used, Lyanna. I came to help, to make sure that we don't destroy everything we've built. I think we have the power to do something different, something better." The Queen found herself stunned by his honesty. She had never expected this from him. He was a human, a species she had always thought of as weak. But now, standing beside her, he seemed to have something that even her people lacked, the courage to fight for something greater than themselves. However, despite their conversation, the tension between them remained. Lyanna still had doubts about Ethan's true intentions. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from her, something she had yet to uncover. As the day of the diplomatic mission approached, the weight of the situation began to settle heavily on both of them. Lyanna knew that the future of her empire and her marriage depended on what happened next. The day of the diplomatic mission arrived, and the tension in the palace was palpable. Queen Lyanna stood at the grand balcony of her royal chambers, gazing out over her empire. The stars glittered above her, but her mind was far from calm. There was a sense of unease, a feeling that things were about to change. She had always been able to control situations, to ensure that her decisions were the right ones. But today, things were different. She felt uncertain. Ethan stood beside her, his presence a quiet contrast to the chaos in her mind. he had become. A constant in her life, someone who could offer a different perspective when the weight of leadership grew too heavy. Despite his human origins, he had become her confidant, the one person she trusted in a way she never expected. "I'm not sure about this, Ethan," Lyanna said, her voice tinged with worry. "This mission, it could determine the future of our empire. The risks are greater than I anticipated." Ethan turned to her, his eyes steady and calm. "I understand. But remember, it's not just about what's at stake. It's also about how we face it. We can't control everything, but we can control how we respond." The Queen nodded slowly. She had always known that Ethan had a way of seeing things from a different angle, but today, his words carried more weight than ever. She had always been the one in control, the one who made the decisions. But now, as she prepared for the mission, she felt like she was stepping into unknown territory. The mission was to a distant planet, where tensions between the Zenthor and a rival species, the Zorath, had reached a boiling point. The Zorath were known for their fierce warriors and advanced technology. The peace talks had been in progress for months, but now it seemed that the delicate balance was about to shatter. Lyanna's role was clear. She had to represent her people and ensure that war was avoided. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play, something she had yet to understand. As they boarded the royal ship, Lyanna was surrounded by her trusted advisors. They were all skilled in matters of diplomacy, strategy, and war, and they had prepared for this moment for weeks. But as she glanced at Ethan, standing quietly beside her, she realized that it wasn't just the advisors she needed to rely on. It was him, too. Ethan, despite his human background, had a sharp mind and a deep understanding of strategy. While the Zenthor were a powerful species, Ethan's perspective, shaped by his human experiences, gave him an insight that others lacked. His ability to think outside the box had already proven invaluable, and Lyanna couldn't deny that she had come to rely on him in ways she never thought possible. The journey to the Zorath homeworld was long and fraught with tension. As they approached the planet, the Queen felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had been in many battles, faced countless challenges, but this was different. This time, it wasn't just her empire at stake. It was the future of their alliance with humanity and her very marriage to Ethan. Upon arriving, they were greeted by the Zorath leaders, who were as fierce as their reputation suggested. The room was filled with an air of hostility, each side trying to gauge the other's strength. The Zorath, proud and powerful, looked down upon the humans, but Ethan stood tall beside Lyanna, refusing to shrink away. He knew the stakes, and he wasn't about to let fear take control. The Zorath leader, a towering figure named General Varkar, stepped forward, his eyes, cold and calculating, locked with Lyanna's. "Your empire's alliance with the humans is an affront to everything we stand for," he growled, his voice deep and menacing. "We will not tolerate this weakness." Lyanna held her ground, her posture regal and unyielding. "This alliance is not a sign of weakness, General. It is a sign of strength. We are choosing peace, not war." The exchange was tense, with both sides unwilling to back down. But as the discussions continued, Lyanna found herself struggling to keep control. The Zorath were powerful, and their pride made them difficult to negotiate with. Each word felt like a battle, and Lyanna's patience was beginning to wear thin. That's when Ethan stepped forward. With a calmness that surprised everyone, he addressed General Varkar. "You speak of strength, General, but what is strength without honor? What is power without the ability to see beyond your own pride?" His words were simple, yet they carried an undeniable weight. Strength is not about domination. It's about making the right choices even when it's difficult. The room fell silent as the Zorath leader glared at him, his eyes filled with disdain. But Ethan didn't back down. Instead, he stood his ground, his gaze unwavering. General Varkar's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing. "You speak like a warrior, human. But what do you know of battle?" Ethan smiled slightly. "More than you might think." At that moment, something shifted in the air. The tension in the room became palpable. The Zorath leader had underestimated Ethan, and now he was beginning to realize it. There was a fire in the human that Lyanna had never fully seen before. A strength that went beyond physical power. It was a strength of character, of conviction, and it caught the attention of everyone present. General Varkar stepped back, his eyes still locked on Ethan. "Perhaps I have misjudged you," he said, his voice low, "but we will see if your strength is enough to prove your worth." The challenge had been made, and the stakes were higher than ever. Lyanna could feel the shift in the air, and for the first time, she realized just how much Ethan had grown since their first meeting. He was no longer just a human diplomat. He was a force to be reckoned with, and his true might had been unveiled. As the discussions continued, Lyanna found herself watching Ethan with new eyes. She had always known he was capable, but she had never seen this side of him before. He wasn't just a man in her court. He was her equal, standing beside her as they faced the most difficult challenge of their lives. By the time the meeting ended, the tension had not fully dissipated, but something had changed. The Zorath were no longer as certain of their superiority. Ethan had proven that even a human could be a powerful ally, capable of standing up to the fiercest of opponents. Lyanna looked at her husband, now more than just a diplomat. He had shown her a strength she had never expected. And in that moment, she realized that the man she had married was far more than a symbol of political power. He was her partner in every sense of the word. The events of the diplomatic mission had left both Queen Lyanna and Ethan in a state of quiet reflection. While they had successfully averted the immediate threat of war with the Zorath, the tension in the air had not fully lifted. The encounter had revealed something to both of them, a side of Ethan that neither had expected. Lyanna found herself haunted by the image of him standing tall against General Varkar, his words sharp and full of conviction. It was a side of Ethan that had always been hidden, buried deep beneath the surface. In the days that followed, Lyanna found herself unable to shake the feeling that there was more to her human husband than met the eye. She had always considered him a mere diplomat, a tool to secure a political alliance. But now, after witnessing his bravery, his intelligence, and his unwavering strength in the face of danger, she couldn't help but wonder, what else did he keep hidden? Ethan, for his part, was just as unsettled. He had always known that his background was different from that of other humans. His family, though humble, had always carried a secret, one passed down through generations. It was a secret that he had kept buried for most of his life, even from those closest to him. But the events of the mission had forced him to confront it. The power he had revealed to the Zorath had been no accident. It was something far deeper, something tied to his bloodline. That night, as they sat alone in the quiet of their chambers, Lyanna turned to Ethan with a look of determination in her eyes. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft but firm, "there is something I need to know. Something I've been wondering about for a while now. What is it that you're hiding? I've seen the strength you have, but I know it's not just your words. There's something more, something you've been keeping from me." Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. He had known this moment would come. He had always feared that one day his past would catch up to him. But the Queen's gaze, steady and searching, made him realize that there was no avoiding the truth any longer. "I never wanted to tell you," Ethan said slowly. "It's not because I don't trust you, Lyanna. It's because I never wanted anyone to see me differently. The truth is, I'm not like other humans. I never have. Been? Liana's eyes narrowed slightly, her curiosity piqued. What do you mean? Ethan hesitated, unsure of how to explain the power that flowed through him, the power that had been dormant for so long. Finally he spoke, his voice low and heavy with the weight of his revelation. My family. We are descendants of an ancient, human race, a race that possessed abilities far beyond what any of us knew. These abilities were passed down through the generations, but they were hidden, buried deep inside us. I didn't discover my own powers until I was much older, but even then, I never fully understood what they were capable of. Liana listened, intently, her mind racing with questions. What kind of abilities are we talking about? Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling on him. It's hard to explain, but I can manipulate energy, control my body's functions, in ways that no one should be able to. I have enhanced strength, speed, and reflexes. I can read people's intentions with just a glance, and I can sense things others can't even begin to understand. Liana's eyes widened, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. So all this time, you've been hiding this from everyone? Ethan nodded. I didn't want to be treated differently. I didn't want anyone to see me as some kind of weapon or tool. I wanted to be judged for who I am, not for the powers I have. Liana was silent for a moment, her mind racing with the implications of what Ethan had revealed. This was not the man she had thought she knew. She had seen him as a mere human, a symbol of unity between their species. But now she realized that Ethan was something far more complex. You've kept this from everyone? Even your own people? Liana asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Yes, Ethan replied quietly. For years, I've kept it hidden. I was afraid of what it might mean. I didn't know if I could control it or if it would make me a target. So I kept it inside, and I lived a life where I was just a normal human. Liana's thoughts swirled with a mixture of emotions, shock, disbelief, and a strange sense of admiration. Ethan had been living with this incredible power for years, yet he had never used it for personal gain. Instead, he had chosen a path of humility, one that led him to her, to the Zenthor Empire, and ultimately to their marriage. As she processed his words, Liana found herself questioning everything she had known about strength. She had always believed that true power came from the ability to control and conquer. But now, she saw that Ethan's power, his true strength, lay in his ability to remain humble, to conceal his abilities for the greater good. I had no idea, Liana said softly. But now I understand. You didn't want to be seen as a weapon. You wanted to be seen for who you really are. Ethan nodded, a hint of relief in his eyes. Exactly. The Queen took a step closer to him, her expression softening. You've proven yourself to be more than I ever imagined, Ethan. I didn't understand you before, but now I see the depth of your strength. It's not in your power alone. It's in your heart. Ethan's gaze softened, and for a moment there was a quiet understanding between them. Liana had always been the one in control, the one who dictated the terms of their alliance. But now, as she looked at her human husband, she realized that the balance of power had shifted. Ethan was no longer just a political tool. He was her equal, standing beside her not only as a diplomat, but as someone whose strength and integrity she respected deeply. I've never felt this way before, Liana said quietly. I've always had control, always been in charge. But with you, Ethan, I'm not so sure anymore. Ethan reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and steady. You don't have to be in control all the time, Liana. We're in this together. In that moment, something profound shifted between them. The secrets were out in the open, and there was no turning back. They were no longer just queen and diplomat. They were partners, united not only by politics, but by a deeper bond, one that neither of them had anticipated. The days following the revelation of Ethan's true strength were filled with a mix of uncertainty and new beginnings. Queen Lyanna had always been the one in control, the one who made the decisions. But now, standing next to Ethan, she felt a shift in the balance of power. It was not that she had lost her strength, but rather that she had come to see Ethan's strength in a new light. The hidden abilities he possessed had not only impressed her, but they had also forced her to reconsider everything she thought she knew about loyalty and strength. Despite their growing understanding of one another, the political world around them continued to press for answers. The Zenthor Empire had always been ruled with an iron fist, and Lyanna's decisions were seldom questioned. But now the alliances she had formed, including her marriage to Ethan, were under scrutiny. Some of her advisors had begun to question whether a union between their species was truly beneficial or if it was a risk to the Empire's future. Lyanna had expected this. She had always known that her position as queen came with immense pressure. But this time, it was different. She could feel the weight of her people's expectations bearing down on her. There were whispers in the court, subtle but growing louder, questioning her decisions. They did not understand Ethan. They did not see him the way she did. They saw him as a foreigner, a human who had no place in the powerful and ancient Zenthor Empire. The tension in the palace grew, and Lyanna found herself caught between the loyalty to her people and the growing loyalty she felt toward Ethan. Her mind raced with questions. Was she making the right choice by allowing a human, even one as extraordinary as Ethan, to share her throne? What if their marriage threatened the future of her empire? One evening, after a long day of meetings with her council, Lyanna stood alone in her chambers. The stars outside were visible through the large windows, their light shining brightly over the galaxy. The stillness of the night was a welcome relief after the chaos of the day. But even in this moment of peace, her thoughts remained unsettled. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something that would challenge her and Ethan in ways they hadn't yet imagined. Ethan entered the room quietly, his steps soft on the stone floor. He had grown accustomed to the silence of the palace, to the moments when Lyanna needed space to think. But tonight, he felt the weight of the situation too. He knew that their bond, despite the growing strength between them, was still fragile. The political landscape was shifting, and it seemed that their marriage was at the heart of it. "Lyanna," Ethan said softly, his voice breaking the silence. "I can sense the tension in the court. They're beginning to doubt us, aren't they?" Lyanna turned to face him, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "Yes, the whispers are getting louder. Some of my advisors don't believe that a union with a human is the right choice. They see it as a weakness, a threat to the Empire's future." Ethan walked closer to her, his presence steady and reassuring. "I never wanted to be a threat to your empire. I only wanted to help, to be by your side, to prove that humans can be allies, not enemies." "I know," Lyanna replied, her voice softening. "But the pressure is mounting, Ethan. My people are loyal to me, but they're not sure about you. There are those who see you as a tool, and those who see you as a danger. I have to prove to them that our union is strong enough to withstand this." Ethan nodded slowly. "What do you want me to do?" Lyanna hesitated, unsure of what the next steps should be. She had always been in control, always made the tough decisions. But this time, she needed help. She needed to know that Ethan was truly committed, that his loyalty to her and to the Empire was unwavering. "You must prove your loyalty," she said, her voice firm but thoughtful. "Not just to me, but to the Zenthor. You must show them that you are not a weakness, but a strength. If we are to survive this, we need to stand together, and your actions will speak louder than words." Ethan met her gaze, his expression unwavering. "I understand. I've always been loyal to you, Lyanna. But if this is about proving my strength to the people, then I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Liana looked at him for a long moment, searching his eyes for any sign of hesitation. But there was none. Ethan was resolute, determined to prove his worth not just to her, but to the empire she ruled. It was a test of loyalty, one that neither of them could afford to fail. The next day, Liana called for a public assembly. The court was filled with her closest advisors, diplomats, and nobles. The air was thick with anticipation, and whispers echoed through the halls. Liana stood before them, her regal presence commanding attention. Ethan stood by her side, his expression calm but tense. "My people," Liana began, her voice strong and clear. "Today I stand before you not as a queen, but as a woman who has chosen to unite with a human. Some of you question this choice. Some of you fear what it means for our future. But I am here to tell you that our future depends on our ability to evolve, to unite with those who have the strength and wisdom to stand by our side." She turned to Ethan, her gaze meeting his. "Ethan has proven his loyalty, not just to me, but to the Empire. He has shown courage, wisdom, and strength that few could have predicted, and it is time for him to prove that his place here is not a weakness, but a strength. He will face a test, a challenge, one that will show you, my people, that he is worthy of the bond we share." The room was silent as the tension grew thick. Ethan knew what was coming. He had been prepared for this moment, but the gravity of the situation still weighed heavily on him. The challenge would not be easy, but he was ready to face it. Liana's voice broke the silence. "Ethan, step forward." With a steady breath, Ethan stepped into the center of the room. His heart beat in his chest, but his expression remained calm. This was his moment to prove his loyalty, not just to Liana, but to the empire that she ruled. The court watched in anticipation, waiting to see what would happen next. Liana's challenge was simple. Prove that he could endure the trials of strength and courage that the Zenthor had relied on for generations. If Ethan succeeded, he would prove his place in their world. If he failed, it could mean the end of their union. Liana's eyes met his, and she nodded once. "Do what you must." And with that, Ethan was faced with the test of his loyalty, a challenge that would decide not only his fate, but the future of their alliance. The test was set. The challenge that would determine Ethan's true place within the Zenthor Empire had begun, and the entire court was watching closely. Liana stood at the edge of the room, her eyes fixed on Ethan as he prepared for what was to come. The weight of the moment was not lost on her. This was more than just a test of strength or skill. This was about trust. This was about proving that their bond was strong enough to withstand the doubts and fears of those around them. Ethan, standing in the center of the room, knew that everything was on the line. His heart raced, but his mind was clear. He had faced challenges before, human challenges, political challenges. But this was different. This was not just about proving himself to Liana, but to her people. He could not afford to fail. The future of their union depended on it. The test itself was simple in appearance. The court had chosen a series of trials designed to challenge both Ethan's physical and mental strength. It was a test that the Zenthor themselves had undergone in their early days as a species, a way to prove their worthiness as leaders. For Ethan, it would be a trial like no other, but he had the one advantage that no one could have anticipated: his hidden powers, the strength that lay within him, ready to be unleashed. The first trial was one of combat. Two of the Zenthors, finest warriors, strong and skilled, stepped forward to challenge Ethan. They were larger, faster, and more experienced, and the room buzzed with anticipation. The warriors were ready to show the humans that their strength was nothing compared to the Zenthor. Liana watched with a mixture of pride and worry. She knew that Ethan had the ability to defeat them, but she also knew that this test wasn't just about winning. It was about showing that his strength was not something to be feared, but something to be respected. The signal was given, and the two warriors lunged at Ethan, their movements quick and calculated. But Ethan was ready. His reflexes were sharper than anyone had expected. He dodged the first warrior's strike with ease, his movements fluid and precise. The second warrior attacked from behind, but Ethan spun around, using his speed and strength to counter the blow. The court watched in stunned silence as Ethan held his ground against the two powerful warriors. It wasn't just his physical abilities that were impressive, but his calm focus. He didn't attack recklessly. He waited for the right moment, and when it came, he disarmed the first warrior with a swift movement, sending him to the floor. The second warrior, realizing he could not defeat Ethan with brute force alone, stepped back, eyes filled with respect. Ethan stood tall, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. The room was silent, the tension thick in the air. Liana's eyes locked with his, and for the first time since their marriage, she saw him not just as a man, but as a partner. He had passed the first trial, but this was only the beginning. There were more challenges ahead, and she knew they would test him in ways he had never been tested before. The second trial was one of intellect. Liana's council had prepared a series of complex puzzles and challenges meant to test Ethan's ability to think strategically, to make decisions under pressure. It was a test that many of the Zenthor had struggled with in their youth, and it was one that they expected Ethan to fail. They were convinced that the human mind, though clever, could not match the centuries of knowledge that the Zenthor had accumulated. But Ethan had never been one to shy away from a challenge. The first puzzle was a complex arrangement of symbols and patterns meant to test his ability to recognize connections and make quick decisions. The Zenthor had expected him to struggle, but Ethan attacked the puzzle with the same calm focus he had shown in the combat trial. He studied the symbols carefully, his mind working quickly to decipher the hidden meaning. Within minutes, he had solved the puzzle, the pieces falling into place with ease. The second challenge was a tactical simulation, where Ethan had to lead a small team through a series of strategic maneuvers. The goal was to outsmart an enemy force using limited resources. The Zenthor believed this would be where he would fail. After all, humans were not known for their battlefield strategy. But once again, Ethan surprised them. He made quick decisions, adapting to the ever-changing situation with ease. His team moved as one, executing his plan flawlessly, and they emerged victorious. As the second trial came to an end, Liana stood at the front of the room, her heart swelling with pride. Ethan had passed both trials with grace and strength, but she knew that the final trial would be the most difficult of all. It would not be about strength or intelligence. It would be about loyalty, about the bond they shared and whether or not their union could withstand the pressures of their respective worlds. The final trial was a test of trust. Liana had always been in control of her empire. She had never needed anyone to stand beside her, and she had never relied on anyone's loyalty. But now, with Ethan by her side, she was faced with the ultimate question. Could she trust him with her people, with the future of the empire, and with her heart? In the center of the room, Liana placed a small ceremonial dagger on a pedestal. It was a symbol of the ultimate test, a test that would determine if Ethan was truly worthy of the throne. To pass, Ethan had to demonstrate that his loyalty was unwavering, that his commitment to her and her people was as strong as her own. Liana turned to him, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Ethan, this is the final trial. It is not one of strength or intellect. It is a trial of trust. If you wish to prove your loyalty to me and to the Zenthor, you must take this dagger and pledge your loyalty not just to me, but to the Empire. Ethan's heart raced as he looked at the dagger. It was a simple blade, but it held the weight of centuries of tradition. He had already proven himself in the eyes of the court, but now he had to prove something far more important: his commitment to the Empire, to Lyanna, and to their shared future. He took a deep breath, his hand steady as he reached for the dagger. As his fingers wrapped around the hilt, he turned to face Lyanna, his eyes filled with sincerity. "I pledge my loyalty to you, Lyanna," he said, his voice strong and clear. "I pledge my loyalty to the Zenthor, and I vow to stand by your side, not as a mere ally, but as your equal. I will fight for this empire, and I will fight for us." The court watched in stunned silence as Ethan spoke those words. It was a moment of unity, of understanding that went beyond politics and power. Lyanna looked at him, and in that moment, she knew that their future was secure. Their bond was stronger than any trial, and together, they would lead the galaxy into a new era of peace and prosperity. The room erupted in applause, and Lyanna stepped forward, her heart full of pride and love. Ethan had passed the final trial, not just as a human, but as a true partner. Their journey together had only just begun, but now, with the weight of their bond behind them, they were ready to face whatever challenges the future held.